So, cliche statement alert, I never planned on making this video. Not because it's interesting or controversial, but just because pretty much every booktuber on the platform has already made some version of it. But I was surprised to see a comment on one of my earlier videos asking how to read more regularly, and it reminded me of the metaphor, I guess the allegory, about the bread aisle. All of us are out here just making bread. Some make sourdough, some make rye, some make whole wheat, but it's all still bread. I'm just another baby in the bread aisle. Here's a video about how you could possibly read more. So the first piece of advice I have is ask yourself why you want to read more. Is it something you used to do that you fell out of the habit of? Do you feel like you're too busy? Is it hard for you to focus? Do you feel lonely because you no longer have friends who like to read the same books as you? Do you feel like you should because you've read so many top 10 tricks of millionaire millennial articles that all talk about reading? Do you feel like you should because you think it'll make other people think you're smarter? Like, all of these are very different reasons. And if you're trying to figure out how to make reading a part of your daily habit, it's important to ask yourself first why it's not part of your daily habit and why you feel you need to make it so. Now, this may be sacrilegious for a booktuber to say, but not everybody needs to be a reader. We all have different hobbies, and this idea that reading is somehow a superior to hobby than others, in my opinion, is ridiculous. I mean, let's take, movies and books. How are we supposed to say that someone who loves watching movies, whether they're, French wave neo-realism films, whether they're nature documentaries, or whether they're all superhero films, how is that person automatically less intelligent than a person who only reads World War II books or only reads mafia, romance, reverse harem books? Like, it makes no sense. And yet there's still this idea of like, wow, if you read a lot, you must be super intelligent, when that implies that people who don't read aren't intelligent. There are different types of intelligence. And should intelligence be the one character trait that we are most invested in, as opposed to patience, empathy, kindness, generosity? I'm getting on a philosophical track. I just want to tell you that if you click this video because you want to become a reader and you never have been a reader before, give yourself permission to ask yourself, is this what I really want? Or is this what I feel like I should want? The next thing I would recommend is find the types of books that you actually think you want to read. This may sound absurdly simple, but if you're someone who only wants to read enemies to lovers romance, do it. If you're someone who only wants to read memoirs of famous celebrities, do it. If you're someone who only wants to read 6,000 page long, incredibly specific and tedious, I might argue, fantasy novels about elves and dwarves and goblins, do it. Yes, there are stereotypes about individual readers. Yes, there are stereotypes about genres. And yes, some assholes may judge you for reading the same type of book over and over. But again, if you spend so much time thinking about what other people think, or making assumptions about what other people are going to think about, because honestly, except for on book Twitter, who cares what's on your shelves, you're going to do yourself a disservice. And if you're someone who used to read and you just fallen out of the habit, just go back through your Goodreads or your Storygraph, go look on your shelves, maybe even ask your parents, hey, what did I used to read a lot when I was younger? Oh, right, the Babysitter's Club. Maybe I want to start with that, or start with something like that. My next tip would be, don't be afraid of books that are out of your age range. Now, most of the people who watch this channel are between 25 and 34, so I'm mainly thinking of younger books. Y'all know I love picture books. Y'all know that I love folk tales and fairy tales. And sometimes when I want to read, but I don't necessarily want to read something that is going to suck me in and keep me there for hours, or I don't necessarily want to read something that is going to involve a lot of, words that I have to Google, I'll go pick some of my favorite picture books. I'll go pick some of my favorite fairy tale books. That is reading. I'm not going to get into the whole argument about should you count those on your, Goodreads goal saying you read 500 books in a year, but there are 500 picture books. I don't care about that. Are you noticing a theme here about ignoring the peanut gallery, about ignoring the Greek chorus? Reading is reading. And sometimes I just want to read, and I want to read something familiar, something with beautiful illustrations, and something that makes me feel at peace. And for me, that's picture books. For you, it could be middle grade, it could be comic books, it could be graphic novels, it could be manga or manhwa. There are so many different ways to read. And also, remember that reading doesn't necessarily always mean in the physical form. If you're an audiobooks person, if you're an ebook person, if you're someone who really enjoys, long form articles like on The Atlantic and The New Yorker, that's all reading. And if someone reads, the New York Times every day, back to back, reads the whole thing, and they're like, oh my gosh, I never have time to read. Baby, that's reading. Now, if you want to read more books, be my guest, but don't sell yourself short for the reading that you do. The next thing I would recommend, something that I very much practice, is to research books before you read them. Now, some people I know are not a fan of this. Some people prefer to have recommendations from friends or family. Some people prefer to have recommendations from BookTube and from other people online. But in general, since I've started this channel, which is since I started reading more frequently, I have found that the majority of the books that I have truly disliked, books that I wanted to DNF or did DNF, were random ass recommendations for other people. I'm trying to decide whether or not I'm going to do a video on Actor Age Eve Brown, because it is such a beloved book on this platform and I have thoughts. But in general, by doing research on a book, as in reading the back flap, as in looking up a summary online, looking up trigger warnings potentially if that is your practice, that can be really, really helpful and not wasting your time, especially if you're someone like me who does not use their library as much as they should and mainly buys books. I've had a lot of success with going with authors that I'm already familiar with or trying genres I'm already familiar with, and when I do branch out into other genres, I make sure to do my research. So for example, I started reading Actor Age, wow, tongue twister, Eve Brown, because I wanted to try more romance. However, in the future, I think I would probably be more mindful of the type of romance. Is the focus on mainly a heterosexual relationship? Is the focus mainly on the carnal intimacy between the two? Is it a slow burn? Is it an enemies to lovers? I didn't do any of that research, and I think I should have. So I don't want to tell you that you have to do an entire 5-paragraph essay on every single book you're thinking of picking up. But if one of the reasons that you're struggling to read is because you are struggling to find books you actually like, I think it's time to mute some of the booktubers, including me. I think it's time to ignore the New York Times bestseller list, because there are so many amazing books out there. Honestly, it breaks my heart that I'm going to die before I can read every single book that I want to read. I promise you that if you're someone who likes to read or thinks that you like to read, there will be not just a book, but dozens, most likely hundreds of books out there that you'll enjoy. However, the way the publishing industry works, the way BookTube works, you're often being introduced to, marketed to, highlighting in your social media or in your feeds, your For You page. What you're normally seeing is a minute percentage of what's out there. The next thing I want to talk about is the concept of DNFing. So do not finish, DNF. And this is a bit hypocritical because in general, I don't DNF books. Even before I started a BookTube channel, I have really strong opinions about having strong opinions about something that I haven't finished. I don't apply that to other people. And as someone who just recently DNF'd The Romance of Lust, because you can watch my What I'm Reading Right Now video to find out why, I'm glad I didn't force myself to go through that. I'm glad I did not, push down my discomfort and my frustration and just to get through it. And now that is not necessarily a beloved best-selling novel. I can totally understand how you may feel some pressure from other people if you say that you DNF'd Dune or Lord of the Rings or some other really popular text. But again, ignore the peanut gallery, ignore the Greek chorus. If you're not enjoying it, stop. Because the worst thing that can happen, even if you do finish the book, is that this puts you off reading for another 3 months. That by forcing yourself to read something you don't want to read, you are recreating the situations that you experienced in middle school or high school or in college that threw you off the reading track in the first place. Don't punish yourself. Give yourself permission. I am talking to myself now more than you because I'm not good at this one, but putting it up on the internet. Give yourself permission to stop reading books that you don't enjoy. The other thing I would hopefully like you to remember, is that reading should be a hobby. Now, I am a booktuber, so I do talk about these things publicly. I don't make any money from this, so it's not a job, but let's say someday I do. I personally think that would change my relationship with books. Not necessarily for better or for worse, but if people were coming to me specifically for certain types of recommendations, they wanted my advice on certain novels that had come out, or they were really excited about a series, I would probably read those things. I would want to be of service to the people that watch me. I would want to give them valuable information at the same time as hopefully just keeping them entertained for a few minutes with my personality. But when you're reading for a hobby, you don't have to do that. Like, you're not on the clock. It doesn't matter if everybody and their mother is reading this book. It doesn't matter if you're like, oh, wow, I should like this book because this book is a staple of my genre. And can I really say I'm a fan of this genre if I don't read? Again, this ties into give yourself permission. Hobbies should be fun. And if reading isn't fun, you have two options. Find out what's making it not fun and fix it, or stop reading. And again, this might be sacrilegious to say as a booktuber, but not reading doesn't make you a bad person. It doesn't make you a dumb person. It doesn't make you, less worthy of anything. It just means you don't read. Like, I don't wrangle cattle. So, we're just assigning a lot of, I mean, like, socially and culturally, we assign all this value to people who are readers and non-readers when it's bullshit. Like, it's just a hobby, or at least it should just be a hobby. And if you want to make it a job, that's a different thing. But keep that in mind. You're not on the clock, so you don't need to punish yourself by grinding through something you're not interested in. And my last tip, if it even is a tip, is if you're struggling to read, if you're struggling to pick up books and finish them, or, you're struggling to read more regularly, maybe you just don't need to read right now. Like, if you're someone who used to consistently read, and by used to, that could have been last month or last year or when you were in middle school, sometimes it's okay to just give your brain a break and let yourself off the hook. For example, as someone who reads fairly regularly, when I have days where I'm just like, I don't want to dive into a new story, I'm not interested in picking this up, I'll watch anime. I'll listen to an entire album. I'll watch movies. I'll go on a walk with my partner. Like, I'll take naps. Like, it's sometimes you need a break. And if you're someone who puts certain pressure on yourself to read, if you're someone who like really struggled through a really thick text, or you just finished a really emotional book, like, oh my gosh, I can't tell you how many times I finished a book, felt like my heart was ripped out of my chest, and I was like, I need a break. I'm not ready to get into a relationship again. I just got out of another long-term one. I need some time to focus on me. And then I don't read for like a solid 2-3 weeks. That is okay. That is completely okay. And if there's one thing you get from this video, I want it to be to give yourself permission, be gentle with yourself, interrogate why or why not you want to read or have not been reading, and do your best to ignore the peanut gallery. There are plenty of other tips that you can find in other videos, such as listening to audiobooks, such as reading at the same time every day, such as starting with rereads, books that are already familiar, such as, joining a book club. But the reason I don't want to get into all those is because I don't do them. So I can't really speak authentically on those tips when they're not tips that I practice. So this is my contribution to the bread aisle. These are a few things that I hope may be helpful to you as you're figuring out your journey as a reader, or figuring out that you are not a reader. And as always, I hope to see you next time. Bye.